most of EmployUs' life, it was really myself, my co-founders, and at Hireology, it's about a 200-person company. So everything that I never had time to do, all of a sudden we had someone who that was their full-time job. They were an expert at it. We would handle customer success ourselves. It was us monitoring our Zendesk account, right? At Hireology, they got a whole team. I obviously, as a founder, had to relinquish a lot of control. I wasn't making all those decisions, but people who are better than me, smarter than me, and can really focus and turn that piece of the business into the best it can be.
Hey everyone, welcome to Honey and Hustle. I'm your host, Angela Hollowell, and in this episode, I am speaking with Ryan O'Donnell, who is one of the co-founders of Hireology, which has since been acquired. By the end of this episode, you will learn how this Guinness World Record holder sold his company and how you can do the same. Thanks so much for joining us today. This podcast is free and will always be free and available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, Hey Ty, you name it. While it's free for you to consume, it's not free for us to create. We pay our video editors, writers, production assistant, and operations manager for helping us make this show come to life. If you'd like to support us in making this show, please consider subscribing to our Substack community, using our affiliate links, or just simply sharing the show with someone who might enjoy it. All right, let's get into this conversation. So, Ryan, you have a very special honor today on the show. You are our first founder who has ever been acquired. And I know you can't share the number with me, but I would love to know how, one, if you knew you wanted EmployUs to be acquired to begin with, and what kind of the structure of that deal was.
Yeah, definitely. Well, honored to be here. Thanks for having me. Nice to be first to check that box for you. We always knew we wanted to be acquired. We raised venture capital, so at some point investors want their money back, and I'd been building. I started the company in 2014. We sold it in 2021, so mid-pandemic.
Wow.
So a lot of factors, and happy to get into the whole story. But definitely knew we wanted to sell. I wanted to sell the right folks, and obviously Hireology was a good pick for us.
Okay. So talk to me about how you structured that deal and how you knew that was the company you wanted to be acquired by.
Yeah, so kind of to backtrack a little bit. So COVID hits, right? March 2020, we all felt it.
Yeah.
Not a great time to have a job app. So we had a lot of our customers that were we got to stop hiring, pause things. We lost about half our revenue in April 2020, May 2020. And we got some interest, surprisingly, in the months that followed, a couple of folks had reached out, interested, and I think it kind of smelled what was going on, a lot of these companies gave us real low ball offers, not good outcomes for myself, my co-founders, my investors. But we just kept, heads down. We're let's keep doing this. We grew the business a lot over the kind of back half of 2020. A lot of companies that were essential workers, hiring a lot of essential workers, they couldn't find talent any other way. And our tool kind of filled a unique niche for them. So 4x our revenue, and then wanted to, put our feelers back out there and say, hey, is there a good offer that exists or not? Ran a full process with a local group called Base Estate. Contacted a lot of different companies in the space, and kind of got down to a few different potential companies that had good terms, and then it kind of came down more to cultural fit. Where would we actually enjoy working, and what could we actually build together? And when I met with Adam Robinson, who's the founder and CEO of Hireology, hit it off. We're this is a guy who I could definitely see working with, building the company with. And, we both kind of had our own internal checklists of what we wanted to see happen. Yeah. And, that was about 2 years ago. And, we checked all those boxes. So, it worked out.
Okay, that's good. So, to my understanding, typically not typically, but sometimes when companies get acquired, a part of the deal is that the founders of the company that is being acquired will come work at the parent company for 3 years, 5 years, whatever the deal is, and then they will have their exit. So when we talk about, I had a 7-figure exit, typically that happens over the course of many years, right? And some of that is paid during the time that you're working with the parent company or the company that's hired you. So can you talk to me a little bit about how that works for you and your co-founders? Like, how long have you been working with Hireology since then? Sounds like about 2 years. How long do you have to go? What does that look like?
Yeah. So, you want to kind of make sure you do a couple things. So you want to take care of your investors. So all of our investors got paid out. And then for my co-founder and I, we weren't ready to quit. Like we had a lot of, fuel left in the tank. We wanted to keep going. So we structured our now basically like try to get different milestones for a little over 2 year period of time. But, things keep on going well with Hireology. And, even though kind of our formal commitment is kind of wrapped up, we're still obviously kind of doubling down and kind of do more than what we originally want to do with the acquisition. You integrate the companies, you do all like cross-selling, you bring kind of the product that we had built at EmployUs to all of the Hireology customers. And you start looking at like, well, what's next? What more could we build? And, are there interesting things we can do to not just make what we had with EmployUs and grow that, but like we also grow Hireology and take the whole company to another level. So that's what my co-founder and I are pretty excited about doing now.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So in terms of making decisions, right, it went from you and your co-founder to now you and this entire other company. How has decision making kind of changed? How has your relationship with your coworkers kind of changed? Like, how does that look for you?
Yeah, definitely. Well, EmployUs is really small. Myself, my co-founder, and at different times we had some other folks on the team. But for most of EmployUs' life, it was really myself, my co-founders, and at Hireology, it's about a 200-person company. So everything that I never had time to do, all of a sudden we had someone who that was their full-time job. They were an expert at it. We would go to events occasionally, right? Hireology's got a full-time events team. We're going out to all these different conferences. We would handle customer success ourselves. It was us monitoring our Zendesk account, right? At Hireology, they got a whole team. So I obviously, as a founder, had to, relinquish a lot of control. I wasn't making all those decisions. But people who are better than me, smarter than me, and, can really focus and, like, turn that piece of the business into the best it can be, like, let them make the decisions, Let them figure out how to price it, how to market it, have them working on each of those deals with a customer. One person doesn't have to, do it all by themselves. Nor necessarily if one person does it, do they all make the right choices? So definitely with more scale, you got a lot more infrastructure to make better moves and kind of be able to like do the things that you otherwise couldn't do when you're a really small company.
Yeah. So it sounds like, you're singing the praises of the benefits of having, being acquired by a bigger company, right? But what are some of the cons that you may have experienced or some of the cons that you kind of looked out for when you're like, I want to find the right fit?
Yeah. Well, I can definitely speak to some of the things that we were looking out for because, we wanted to be in a company that was growing. So, some of the folks that we were looking at, maybe their businesses at the time, we didn't know if they were going to keep growing. And, hindsight 2020, I can now look at some of them. It's like, that business, if we had hitched our wagon to them, they would not have been able to help us kind of achieve what we wanted to be. One thing that I think was kind of important for us too is, we didn't want to like hitch our wagons to like an overfunded VC hyped unicorn, where, they were kind of at the top of the market in terms of valuation and raised lots of money, but might not actually live into that valuation. So that's kind of, I think, a really important thing is not just think like, what's the company you're joining, but like, is that company healthy? Is that company overvalued, undervalued? Does that company have some good runway? So Hireology checked a lot of those boxes. In terms of other cons, everything does take a little bit longer because you got more people, than when you're doing it by yourself. My co-founder and I, we would sit down, we could just hack something together and put it out to our customers, that week. Customer says they got a problem on a Monday, it's fixed by Tuesday, and we're talking about something else on Wednesday. Things take longer when you got more folks. But, when you got 10,000 customers, you want to handle that differently than when you got a few dozen.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, actually. So something you mentioned twice now is that, now that you're with Hireology and you and your co-founder are not doing all the things by yourself, you have the capacity to think about other things and do other things that are more specialized and like meaningful to you. And I kind of take that to mean in work, but also in life, right? So for people who also don't know, you have another special honor. You are our first Guinness World Record holder here. And I want to talk about that because that has nothing to do with like hiring people. Like, yeah.
It's a very different thing. The record is for the largest food drive in 24 hours in a single location. We broke that record just a few miles down the road at the School of Science and Math in Durham, North Carolina. And I was a high school student. I was on top of the world. It was a whole school effort. We did it one year. We didn't break the record. We only raised about 300,000 pounds of food. Mm-hmm. We came back in 2011 and raised over 500,000 pounds of food. Mm-hmm. And, people will always ask me, like, well, how'd you go from, like, food drives to HR software, the other projects I've kind of been involved with. And I say, like, all entrepreneurs, like, they just want to solve problems.
Yeah.
And, we raised more food faster than anyone else, anywhere else, in 18 hours. And we go to the food bank the next day, and they rent out a whole warehouse for us. It was really cool. We had a picture of us standing on top of all the food. We're like, hey, maybe this will get in the book. I don't think it actually did, but it's okay. Kid can dream. Yeah. But the head of operations for the food bank came over and he said, we distribute over 100,000 pounds of food every operating hour.
So this is going to last you like one day?
One day. He's like, you gave people breakfast, Ryan. Who's going to give them lunch? And say all entrepreneurs want to solve problems. That was the first big problem. I was like, oh shit. Someone's got to keep doing this. We can't just kind of hang our hat up and say, hey, we got this world record. Congratulations. Pat ourselves on the back. So, a year later, I started my first startup. It was a fundraising app. And then I just kind of got into the world of startups. And, once you get that bug, it can be hard to do anything else.
Yeah. So you've also, like you said, EmployUs was not your first kind of venture into startups. You've advised other startups. You've had your own startup. You've done a lot of work in fundraising here in the Triangle and in other places. Talk to me about, your relationship with money, because there are definitely going to be people that are watching this, that are listening to this, and just people in life that are like, okay, you raised all this money, but what does this mean for people who need it, right?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of headlines of folks who raised, honestly, obscene amounts of money. Mm-hmm. That whether it's their organization, whether it's a venture-backed company, and you've got a mandate to scale, they don't scale. They waste the money, or they're what looks like a great nonprofit, but if you ask their clients, they might say this organization's not helping me very much. So I think it's really about getting close to the people that you're actually serving. EmployUs, we helped over 25,000 people get jobs from when we first started the company in 2014 to when we sold it. And we raised about $1.5 million, which sounds like a lot, but in, tech startup land, that's not a whole lot of money. Even in, the local startup scene, that might seem like a lot, but if you look at, companies that are based in, New York or San Francisco, $1.5 million is like a small angel round, out there. So, we were able to help a lot of people with that. And when I look at things like the food drive or with Pledge My Check, which was an initiative we did to encourage people who could donate their stimulus checks to help it out. It's how can we get as close to the impact as possible? We had folks who would, take their, $1,200 check and pay someone's rent with it. You get very close to the action there, right? And you kind of know that your money's going to a good cause. But on the flip side, you also know that if you can do things at a certain scale, you can help a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that, I think a lot about when you're raising money, when you're doing a project, especially if it's something that's geared towards helping folks. In the for-profit world, we think about maximizing our profit. Mm-hmm. In the nonprofit world, we don't necessarily think about maximizing our impact. So I think a lot of folks might be thinking too small about what they're doing. If you have the potential to help and impact thousands of people, but you only raise enough money to help 100, mm-hmm. you're not just doing yourself a disservice, you're doing a disservice to the thousands of people you could be helping. Mm-hmm. So I think for a lot of the projects I'm involved with, when I'm talking to founders, if you got a for-profit company, you're doing tech startup land, or you've got a family resource center, it's the same lesson. You want to make sure you've got all the resources you need to be able to meet the needs, whatever that is. That might be we want to be the best program in our county. That might be, we want to have a model that works nationally, but, set that and then go chase after it.
Right.
Go figure that out.
Yeah. No, and I think you make a really important distinction here that we also try to subtly make on the show, which is that being a nonprofit founder doesn't excuse you from the goal setting and some of the mission building and impact building of a for-profit founder, right? You still have, an obligation to raise money, one, to pay yourself at the very least, but also to buy the things that you need, pay the people that you need, garner, organize the things that you need in your community to make the impact that you want and that you're set out to make. And I think your message is just dream big. That is a huge, huge thing, because nonprofit founders, a lot of times they're starting and they're just this is a need that I saw and I just want to help these people, right? But, they could be possibly doing a little bit more. They could be meeting the needs in more than one way, right? And, really expanding their vision beyond that initial kind of thought. And I think it's not that they don't want to. It's not that they don't recognize that there is opportunity there. I think that, their perception of fundraising just may be a little bit different.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. So we've ever since we broke the record, I get a call about once a year from someone who wants to break it. And, sometimes it's a school, sometimes it's a church, sometimes it's someone trying to do their Boy Scout Eagle project, And I always tell them the same thing. It's you got to set the most ambitious goal possible.
Yeah.
You will not get there thinking small. And a lot of folks, the one of the best ones that we saw, I think they didn't even cross 100,000 pounds of food. So for me, I'm that's where I kind of start the goal, but you've got to really think about it at that level of scale. You've got to think, who do I partner with? Do I partner with, a couple small local community organizations, or do I try to get a national sponsor, right? Am I raising food for my local food pantry, or is it with, potentially 2 or 3 large food banks? We covered 34 counties in North Carolina. So it was just a whole nother level. We brought in Walmart, we brought in all 3 of the big universities, all of the other universities in town. We brought in tons of different high schools, senior centers. I mean, we got so many folks at the table that, we knew, before the food drive even started, that we were going to beat last year's record. So we were look, that we know exactly what we can do. We just have to put in the work, and run the numbers and see hey, if we only raise $100,000 for this project, will it be successful? Yeah. And you never want to be in a spot where you miscalculate that and you got to come ask for more money. That doesn't go over nearly as well. But you want to be able to say, hey, for us to really achieve our goals, this is what it's going to take.
Yeah. Yeah, and just for reference, for people who are not familiar with North Carolina has 100 counties. 100, yes. So for 34 counties to be covered, that is literally a third of North Carolina, which is not a small feat for a state of 10, 12 million, something like that. Yeah. So pretty insane. I want to pivot back to the tech world just for a little bit here, since we're kind of talking about startups and goal setting here. First of all, when I moved here, I didn't know how big the tech scene was. I didn't know anything about Research Triangle Park. Didn't know anything about that. And then I started seeing headlines for Research Triangle Park being named Silicon Valley of the East. Talk to me about your perspective of the tech landscape here in the Raleigh-Durham area.
Yeah. I always take some issue when folks try to say that we'll be the next Silicon Valley. I think we'll be the first Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill triangle. We've got our own identity crisis. I think we come through as a region. If you look at some of these national polls, they'll split Raleigh and Durham. Yeah. And if you do that, it'd be well, what if we split San Francisco just in half, just arbitrary? We've got I think some unique setups there, just how our local municipalities are. But I feel at least when I came to the region, I came here for high school and stayed to go to NC State. Most folks in this area consider it, one startup community. And, I've got friends in Chapel Hill working on startups, friends in Durham. I live in Apex now. I started in Raleigh. So I think it's really about looking at what's unique about our region. And in our region, I think we got a lot of folks who are bootstrapping and building some phenomenal companies without raising a whole lot of money.
Yeah.
It's one of the things, it's kind of a necessity. We don't have as much capital as some other markets. So we get real scrappy.
Yeah.
That's one thing we do. Also, like the folks here, like incredibly nice. Like I don't think I've ever run into a founder or an investor or someone in the startup community that was like super arrogant, or wasn't willing to lend a hand. If I needed help with something, I'd obviously help them. And I think it's just a unique part about our community that I haven't been to all the other startup hubs in the country, but it seems when people talk about what it's like to be here, when they've been maybe in New York, Boston, or out west, they seem to highlight like what it's just like to work with some of the folks here, and folks are kind, folks get the job done,
yeah.
and it's a good place to like raise a family, and all these kinds of things, which is probably some of the unique like special sauce of what we have that maybe some other regions don't.
Yeah. Yeah, some of that Southern hospitality, some of that
Southern grit. A little bit of that, a little bit of barbecue, and it's all good.
We're not going to get started on my opinions on what's about barbecue.
I won't go there.
Okay. So as we talk about, really a lot of things that you just mentioned have somewhat nothing to do with work. You know what I mean? They have everything to do with people. So talk to me about your philosophy for building a good people culture, within your startup and now within Hireology.
Yeah, I mean, I think when folks join a startup, they're usually looking for a couple of things, right? Maybe they don't ever see themselves working at a big company, right? Maybe they want to have some of that autonomy. Maybe they want to grow a lot. Like I started EmployUs when I was a senior in college. Right? When I was a senior in college, I didn't know how to sell. I didn't know how to market. I didn't know how to recruit people. And when you're in a startup, you got to learn all those things. Like there's not a training program.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of being like incredibly real with folks and just saying like, this is the job. This is what we got to do. It's going to be very hard. You're probably going to work harder than you would in another role at another company. But you've got an opportunity to learn. And I'm definitely someone who, with a lot of the folks that I like to work with, I like folks who are really curious, who want to like keep bettering themselves, who love to learn, and want to be around other people who also want to put in like their best effort, right? Because I think a lot of folks, if you're in a startup, you got your back against the wall. It's not easy.
Yeah.
You're going to spend a ton of time together, and not that you should build companies with your friends, but you want to build good relationships at work.
Yeah.
And some of the best friends I have now are folks who we worked together maybe on a project once, or we had overlapped at a startup. And when you're in the trenches like that, you can just do some really cool things.
Yeah.
And I think it's just important for folks to like dig in.
Yeah.
And start building with folks that are all kind of interested in a similar passion project or topic. Like with Pledge My Check. There's a bunch of people. We were all at home. We couldn't go anywhere. We all had some skills, and we were like, "Hey, well, what if we start this little fundraising site?" And it was something where we could all contribute in a different way. We got some designers designing stuff. We got some folks reaching out to news outlets. We got some nonprofit folks who are reaching out to different organizations. So you can really create some special sauce with that.
I know you keep using sauce. It makes me think you're hungry.
I know. I saw what you had for lunch. I was like a little jealous.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It's BU Cafe. They were amazing. Always amazing. So my last question before I let you get out of here. When we think about the term "cut for good," right? I think that means something kind of universal, and that's kind of a phrase that's been used in other industries: design for good, film for good, all these types of things. And one thing that I am noticing, and a lot of people are noticing, which is why they're super interested in the tech industry, is that the salaries and the pay have been keeping pace with inflation in a way that other industries have kind of been lagging behind. Do you feel like that's sustainable? Like, do you feel like the tech startup space is somewhere that is going to continue to grow and be able to sustain the pace of the salaries as it continues to move forward? And everything that's coming, AI, 3D printing, like all these new areas, app development, which is, of course has been around, but has become even more robust as we think about different types of web applications. For people who may be listening now, they're like, well, I want to create something in the tech space. I want to have that freedom to have autonomy over my life as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has never been a better time to start something. If you look at how easy it is to start building something like no-code tools, there's a great tool called Glide that I encourage folks to check out. If you want to build a tech product, super easy to just get started with it. And you don't have to go raise $5 million and buy servers and recruit engineers and get an office space and find a data center. You don't have to do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
You can, literally, you can like incorporate with Stripe. You can create a business, get a bank account, get set up to raise money. You can prototype tools. You can figure out how to sell something pretty easily. So I think, there's probably never been a better time to start something. I've seen a lot of stats that show like whenever there's a downturn in the economy, that's when some of the best startups get formed. When the markets are frothy, sometimes you get some bad startups that get formed. And, if you look at some of the companies that have done like large layoffs in the tech space, it's because they overhired. Maybe they had some inflated valuations there.
Yeah.
I don't know, in terms of like salary growth, if that'll always go up and to the right.
Yeah.
But you look at, some sectors that need tech talent who traditionally don't pay, what you might expect from like a big tech company in terms of salary. So I think there's some like normalizing there.
Yeah.
For a lot of folks who have, been in tech or are trying to break into it, unlike the rest of the economy, it's still very much, I feel like, in a recession from, not a lot of companies hiring at the same levels that they were. So they're getting a little bit more choosy of who they hire. They're not offering as big of, salaries as they used to.
Yeah.
People are getting a little bit more realistic about their equity packages, which is important. But I think overall it's a great place where you can jump in, learn a lot, develop some skills, and then you find out if it's something that you want to stay working in a tech company, or maybe you take those skills and you work in a non-tech company, but involved in like product development or the technology side of those businesses.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like a great skill set if anyone's trying to figure out what to do next. It's definitely a good area to learn.
Yeah. Okay. Well, before we let you get out of here, I have some rapid fire questions for you.
Let's go.
You game? All right. He said he's ready. All right. One of them you actually already answered, which was, what tool do you find yourself constantly recommending? It sounds like Glide is one of those tools.
Glide is awesome.
Glide, okay. Sounds
10
good.
out of 10.
No notes. All right. So, the second one is, what would be the name of your autobiography?
Ooh, that's a good question. I am very Irish, Ryan Patrick O'Donnell. So it would probably be something about luck. I've felt like tremendously lucky at each stage that I was building EmployUs with other things, just like happenstance encounters. Okay. So something about luck. Something about luck. Maybe that'll be the title.
Okay, something about luck. I like that. Now that you're at Hireology, how would you describe that brand in 3 words?
Hireology's brand in 3 words. I'm going to steal our slogan from this year.
Okay.
So, Adam, sorry. Is just make it happen. Simple. That's what everyone at Hireology is all about.
Yeah.
Is, we get in there, we're here to help our customers. We're here to make it happen.
Okay. Still like an artist, real time. And then the last one, if you didn't have to work to make money, how would you spend your time?
I just love helping folks. So, but whatever it could be. If I didn't need a job, I would just find ways to help folks. I used to be a foster parent and getting really involved with helping folks who are involved in that system and helping support families so that they can keep their kids and raise their kids in their homes. So those are some of the orgs causes I'm really passionate about, where I would just dive in, with both feet on those things.
Yeah, sounds good. I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming in today and sharing your experience with being acquired and starting a tech startup and, just enjoying the Triangle area.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today's episode. And if you can't wait for the next episode, you can subscribe to our paid membership on Substack to get exclusive content like outtakes, bloopers, after-show thoughts, and more. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on your app of choice or like this video on YouTube. We'll catch you in the next episode.